It was supposed to be a warm evening, filled with laughter, music, and plates piled high with baked macaroni, fried chicken, collard greens, and sweet potato pie. My mother had called the week before, insisting that I bring the children. "Family dinner is important," she had said firmly. "We all need to be together." I hesitated but eventually agreed. Family dinners in my parents' home were never simple. Old grudges had a way of surfacing, and favoritism always lingered in the air. But my children, Ethan and Clara, were excited to see their cousins. I convinced myself it would be fine. We pulled up to the familiar red brick house in Paris, the porch light glowing warmly. I could hear voices inside, overlapping like a choir without rhythm. My father's laughter, my mother's sharp commands, my siblings' banter, it all poured through the open windows. Inside, the table was already set. Platters of food steamed, the smell of cornbread mingling with roasted turkey. My sister Clarissa greeted me with a half-smile. My brother Jerome gave me a quick nod. My children rushed off to play with their cousins. Family dinners always came with tension. My parents had a history of picking favorites. Growing up, I was the one often blamed, the one who bore punishments for things I hadn't done. I had promised myself that my children would never experience the same. Yet as the evening began, I felt the air grow heavy. My mother kept watching Ethan and Clara closely, as though waiting for them to slip. My father leaned back, quiet but observant, his glass of sweet tea in hand. At first, everything seemed fine. We ate. We shared small talk. My children laughed with their cousins over a game of Uno. But then, a crash echoed from the living room, the sound of glass shattering against the floor. Everyone turned. My niece, Alyssa, stood near the broken vase, her face pale. But before she could speak, my mother's eyes darted toward Ethan. "Boy, what did you do?" she barked. Ethan froze, his hands empty, eyes wide. "I didn't do it, Grandma. I swear." But my mother had already risen from her chair. "You don't lie to me. You and your sister always run wild." Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Grandma, it wasn't us." But my father cut her off sharply. "Don't talk back. That vase was expensive." I saw Alyssa open her mouth as though to confess, but fear closed it again. She lowered her head and let silence betray the truth. My parents didn't hesitate. They scolded Ethan and Clara in front of everyone. My mother's words cut like knives. "You two are disrespectful. No home training. Always causing trouble." My children's faces crumpled. Ethan's lips trembled. Clara's eyes filled with tears. They hadn't done anything, but still they bore the shame. I clenched my fists under the table. I looked around the room. My siblings avoided my eyes. Not one of them spoke up. Not even Clarissa, who had seen Alyssa near the vase. The injustice rang in my ears. I heard my mother's voice echoing from my childhood, blaming me for things I hadn't done. I had endured it. But now, it was happening to my children. Something inside me snapped. "Enough!" I shouted, standing so quickly my chair screeched across the floor. Everyone went silent. "You will not humiliate my children. You punished them for something they didn't do, and you let the real culprit sit there untouched." All eyes shifted to Alyssa, who now squirmed in her seat, guilt written all over her face. My father's jaw tightened. My mother narrowed her eyes at me. "You don't come into my house and tell me how to raise children," she snapped. "They're not yours to raise," I shot back. "They're mine, and I won't let you break them the way you tried to break me." The room grew colder. No one dared breathe. I turned to my children. "Get your coats. We're leaving." Ethan and Clara scrambled up, their tears still fresh. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Behind me, my mother called after me. You're ungrateful. You don't walk out on family. I stopped at the door. Family doesn't break each other down, I said firmly. Then I walked out. The car was silent at first, except for Ethan's quiet sobs. I reached back, squeezing his hand. You didn't do anything wrong, I whispered. Clara looked at me through the rearview mirror. Why does Grandma hate us? The question shattered me. She doesn't hate you, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. She's just wrong, and I won't let wrongness win. That night, after I tucked my children into bed, I sat alone in the living room. Memories of my childhood came rushing back. The punishments, the harsh words, the moments I had swallowed my truth because no one would defend me. I realized I had broken the cycle tonight. I had done what no one had done for me. I had stood up. My phone buzzed. It was Clarissa. You shouldn't have left like that, she said softly. I had no choice. Mom's upset. Mom was wrong. There was a pause. Then Clarissa whispered, Alyssa confessed after you left. It was her. She knocked the vase over. My chest tightened. Relief and anger swirled inside me. Clarissa admitted, we were scared to speak up. You know how Mom gets. Yes, I said bitterly. I know exactly how she gets. But silence wasn't protection. It was complicity. The next day, my father called. His voice was stiff, but different. Your mother's not ready to apologize, he said. But she knows now. I exhaled slowly. I don't need her apology. I just need her to stop hurting my children. From that day on, I set boundaries. We visited less often. And when we did, I made sure my children knew. You don't owe anyone silence. You have a voice. Use it. They nodded, their eyes shining with trust. It took time, but my children began to heal. They stopped fearing family dinners. They started to believe me when I told them they were worthy, loved, and innocent. I too began to heal. I realized leaving the party wasn't weakness, it was strength. Sometimes I think of that broken vase. In a way, it represented more than glass. It was the fragile truth in our family, shattered and ignored. But truth, like glass, always leaves sharp edges. And those edges can cut until someone dares to pick them up. I had picked them up. Instead of depending on my parents' house for family, I began hosting dinners in my own home. My table was different, filled with love, fairness, and laughter that didn't come with judgment. My children thrived there. I realized one powerful truth. Family isn't always about blood. It's about who protects you, who believes you, who lets you be yourself without shame. That night at the family dinner had been painful, but it became the start of a new legacy for me and my children, one built on justice, love, and courage. Word traveled quickly. By the weekend, my cousins were calling me, saying my mother had told the whole extended family that I disrespected her in her own house. I laughed bitterly. That wasn't the story. It never was. At school, Ethan wrote a journal entry about what happened at dinner. His teacher called me. Your son has a strong sense of justice, she said. He defended himself so clearly in his writing. Hearing that brought tears to my eyes. The cycle was breaking. Clara asked me one night, Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa still family if they don't treat us like family? Her words struck deep. I told her, family is who stands with you. Sometimes blood doesn't guarantee that. Clarissa came by with Alyssa. Her eyes were downcast. I should have spoken up that night, she admitted. I let you stand alone. I looked at her. You still have a choice. Next time, don't be silent. Jerome, my brother, finally called after weeks of silence. You made a scene, he muttered. No, I corrected him. I made a stand. My father suggested a family meeting to clear the air. I hesitated, but agreed, for my children's sake. We gathered in the living room again, tension thick as smoke. My mother refused to apologize. Children need discipline. If they didn't break the vase, they still caused trouble somehow. Her words stung. I felt my children shrink beside me. Ethan, only 11, lifted his chin. Grandma, I didn't do it. And you hurt me when you said I did. The room went silent. My heart swelled with pride. For the first time, I saw my mother falter. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes flickered. She wasn't ready to admit it, but Ethan's words had pierced her armor. My father cleared his throat. The boy's telling the truth. We were wrong that night. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. The meeting ended without hugs or smiles, but with something new, silence that wasn't hostile, just heavy. Healing had begun, though barely. I continued hosting dinners at my house. Fried catfish, collard greens, cornbread, laughter. My table became the safe place. My children invited their friends, who said, "It feels good here." One Sunday, unexpectedly, my mother came to one of our dinners. She brought sweet potato pie, her specialty. She didn't say much, but her presence spoke louder than words. Later, while washing dishes, she finally whispered, "Maybe I was too hard. That's just how I was raised." I turned to her. And that's why it has to stop with us. Clara, once shy, now led Grace at dinner. "Thank you for a family that listens," she prayed aloud. My mother bowed her head but wiped her eyes afterward. Months later, Alyssa confessed in front of everyone during another family dinner. "It was me who broke the vase. I was scared to say it then." My children looked at her, forgiving. My mother looked at me, ashamed. I began to see clearly, my mother's harshness wasn't born with her. It came from her own parents, who raised her in strictness and silence. Cycles repeating themselves until someone chose to break them. Slowly, my mother softened. She started treating Ethan and Clara differently, not perfectly, but better. My father began inviting them to fish with him on Saturdays. I realized family wasn't about perfection. It was about trying, failing, and trying again. The real betrayal wasn't mistakes, it was silence. And we were learning to speak at last. Years later, Ethan wrote in a school essay, "The night my mom stood up for us, I learned that truth matters more than tradition. Family isn't about never being wrong, it's about who admits it, and who protects you." Reading those words, I knew my children had learned the lesson I had fought so hard to give them. Never let silence bury the truth. Months later, my cousin organized a big family reunion at a rented hall. I hesitated about attending, but Ethan and Clara begged to go. I finally agreed, but I carried boundaries with me like armor. The reunion began with music, barbecue, and dominoes. But soon, familiar whispers returned. My aunt pulled me aside, saying, "You always act too sensitive. Your mama just loves strong discipline." I smiled politely, but inside I bristled. When another cousin tried to tease Ethan about the vase incident, he stood tall. "I didn't do it, and that's over now." His courage silenced the joke. I realized my son was learning strength faster than I had. Clara performed a poem at the reunion talent show. Her words echoed, "Truth is louder than silence. Family is louder than shame." The room fell silent. Even my mother clapped with watery eyes. Later that night, my mother found me outside. She admitted, "I was wrong that night. I carried my own pain, and I put it on your children." The words were quiet, but they cracked open years of silence. I looked at her carefully. "I can forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't erase damage. It means we choose to rebuild differently." She nodded, understanding. My father began spending more time with Ethan and Clara. He told them stories about his childhood in the South, about fishing in muddy rivers, about working hard to provide. They listened, not with fear, but with interest. A new bond grew. Over the next year, family dinners shifted. Arguments still flared, but apologies followed more quickly. My children no longer flinched in their grandparents' presence. The house that once hurt them began, slowly, to heal. At Ethan's high school graduation, my mother stood beside me. She whispered, "You raised him strong. You broke what I couldn't." Tears filled her eyes. I realized the torch of healing had passed to a new generation. Years later, when Clara entered college, she wrote an essay, "Family isn't about perfection. It's about who chooses truth, who chooses to listen, and who dares to change the story we inherit." Reading her words, I smiled. The cycle had ended. The story that began with punishment and silence ended with courage and love. Family dinners were no longer unfinished. They were rewritten, this time in truth.